Part 61. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 601. Chapter 601. Let the third prince and his wife go into a dog hole. Mammy followed Ningtian all the way back to the third prince's residence, but turned into a small alley next to the back door. Mammy. She didn't even know that there was a road here? Under the dumbfounded gaze of Mammy, Ningtian bent down and moved the weeds beside the alley, then pointed at the hole that was about half a person high and said, "Just let you three princes and concubines come out from here." Grandma was shocked. No matter how you looked at it, it looked like a dog hole, right? It was Panula who was waiting for news in the house. When she learned that Fan Kinjao asked her to go into a dog hole, she almost stabbed him to death on the spot. She felt as if she had been connoted by Fan Kinjao, but what was even more hateful was that there was no evidence. But there was Fan Swinning in the house who wanted to kill her. What else could Panula do? Of course it's drilled. Half an hour later, Fan Kinjao arrived at the tea house opposite the Zijiao mansion. In the private room, Panula's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Not only was he used as a mallet, but he was also forced to dig into a dog hole. It's strange that her face looks good. As soon as she saw Fan Kinjao, Panula gritted her teeth and said, "Fan Kinjao, you must be humiliating me on purpose." Fan Kinjao sat across from him calmly, boiling water and making tea. "I thought it was a friendly gesture to lend a helping hand to the third prince's concubine in distress, but if the third prince's concubine insists on guessing me, it's too late to leave now. After all, I wasn't the one who the third prince's concubine with a rope." Panula. "Since you let me go into a dog hole, I have to thank you, right?" Fan Kinjao poured himself a cup of tea, raised it and shook it gently in the air. "My time is precious, and I don't have time to stare at the third princess here." Panula looked at Fan Kinjao suspiciously. "Are you really so kind to help me?" Fan Kinjao said directly, "Of course I don't have such good intentions." Panula. "So why is she sitting here? I am the crown princess, and you are the third prince's concubine. I don't need to say more about the discord between the crown prince and the third prince. The third prince's concubine is also well aware of it. If Aunt Fan in the third prince's residence today wants to harm her, it's just the third prince's own words. I'm just happy to stand aside and watch the fun." Fan Kinjao is not a god, and he prides himself on not being as soft-hearted as many old mothers. In her last life, she had no connection with Panula, and they were not even acquainted with her. But in this life, Panula repeatedly opposed her and became her enemy at every turn. No matter what the reason was, it was enough to write Panula's name in her little notebook of grudges. Different road non-phase plan. They are not medicines in the same medicine jar, so why bother mixing them together? Of course Panula also understands this truth, but if you ask the famous ladies in the main city, even if they hate someone in their hearts, they can only stand up with a glare on their face and occasionally make some insinuations. But how come when we get to Fan Kinjao, all the hidden arrows turn into open guns? This is really about not giving up until people are beaten to death, right? "This is what I found in my house." Panula quickly spoke and got straight to the point. She was afraid that if Fan Kinjao continued talking, she would be beaten to death even before she could crawl out of the pit. Fan Kinjao took the small paper bag handed by Panula, opened it and smelled it carefully. Panula said in surprise, "Aren't you afraid of being poisoned? If you don't even have this ability, how can you join forces with the third prince and concubine?" Fan Kinjao carefully identified the powder on the paper bag again, and then retracted his hand with a smile. "The poison itself is not fatal. Although this poison is made from highly toxic snake bile, the added vine pear root and blackberry just combine the toxicity of snake bile. However, due to the yellow and white color in humans, and hemp seeds retain the diarrheal symptoms of snake bile, which will cause the person who takes it to vomit continuously, become unconscious, and even cause a pale complexion and blue eyes due to a large amount of dehydration. Pan Yulo's eyes widened in shock. This description cannot be said to be completely similar, it can only be said to be exactly the same. If she hadn't been there since Fan Swining's accident, she would have doubted whether Fan Kinjao was also there. Actually, even if Fan Kinjao didn't listen carefully, he knew that the poison Fan Swining took would not be fatal. Fan Swining is not really stupid, how could she risk her life just for the sake of acting? However, Pan Yulo was able to bring this thing over, which saved her a lot of trouble. I heard that the third prince's residence is investigating this matter seriously. Pan Yulo. Do you know again? She really wants to ask now what else Fan Kinjao doesn't know. The third prince wants to frame me, so he has to work hard. Only in this way can he get the emperor's attention. And only if the emperor takes it seriously, can the three princes naturally divide the emperor's attention. But if the third prince's wish comes true, well, and Fan's wish is about to come true. Fan Kinjao's words made it very clear that Fan Swining's thoughts were going on together with Bailey Wrong's. Based on Fan Swining's thinking, he was afraid that after Bailey Wrongs entered the palace and reported the matter to the emperor, he would find a way to reveal the evidence that was left with Pan Yulo in advance. So, Pan Yulo helped her, which was equivalent to helping herself. Pan Yulo looked at Fan Kinjao tangledly, her heart fluctuating. Of course she understood that the third prince wanted to frame Fan Kinjao in order to discredit the prince. If she really helped Fan Kinjao, it would be tantamount to betraying the third prince. But if she doesn't help, are you waiting for Fan Swining to bite her to death? Pan Yulo looked at the powder on the table and suddenly thought that she had already found all the evidence. Even if Fan Swining wanted to slander her again, what would she be afraid of? Thinking like this, Pan Yulo had enough confidence. Just when she was about to speak, Fan Kinjao hit her with a hammer again, causing her head to swell. The third prince and concubine don't have to be lucky. Now that I have found these evidences, and Fan can't do anything to you anymore, because as long as the third prince and concubine shakes her head, I will have the same evidence produced again and placed in the third prince's bedroom. Pan Yulo was stunned. Fan Kinjao, do you dare to threaten me? Fan Kinjao smiled and said, the third prince's concubine was able to find these evidences because of my suggestion, but I will never be too full to meddle in other people's business, so if the third prince's concubine refuses, I will naturally, people should return the original things to their original owners. You dare. Not only do you dare now, but you will also dare in the future. These words were clearly a warning. If Pan Yulo dared to make any small move, Fan Kinjao would do whatever he wanted to do to her. Face such a gangster-like threat, Pan Yulo almost vomited blood. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 602. Chapter 602 just moved his mouth. Pan Yulo knew that Fan Kinjao's words were definitely not just words. Just think about those people who were enemies of Fan Kinjao in the past. Pan Yulo didn't want Fan Kinjao to have a good time, but she wanted to have a good time for herself. Clenched her teeth, Pan Yulo made up her mind and said, tell me what we should do about this matter. Hearing this answer, Fan Kinjao smiled slightly and was not surprised. The fish looks for the fish and the shrimp looks for the shrimp, and the toad looks for the frog. For a person like Bailey Wrongs who is obsessed with profit and will do whatever it takes to achieve his goals, how can the people around him be better? Fan Kinjao stood up and walked to Pan Yulo's side, stretched out his hand to press her shoulders, leaned slightly and whispered in her ear, it's actually very simple, as long as the third prince and concubine put these things. Pan Yulo. Is this even possible? After Fan Kinjao finished speaking, he stood up and nodded, of course it's okay. If someone doesn't offend you, there's no need for you not to offend them. But if someone is riding on your neck to hold the basin, of course it's his own person. The way heals the person's body. After being stunned for a long time, Pan Yulu felt for the first time that what Fan Kinjao said was quite right. If Fan Swinning really framed her this time, even if the third prince knew the truth in his heart, but still wanted to maintain relations with the emperor, he would definitely spare her and punish her severely. Fan Swinning dared to plot against her like this, so what did she have to worry about? After returning to the third prince's residence, Pan Yulu handed the small paper bag containing the things to her mother. After careful instructions, Pan Yulu came to Fan Swinning's yard in person to express her condolences. At this time, Fan Swinning had woken up and was sitting on the edge of the bed drinking ginseng soup. Looking at Pan Yulu entering the door, Fan Swinning put down the soup bowl and saluted, "Greetings to the third prince and concubine." Pan Yulu suppressed the abuse in her heart, and hurriedly supported her by pretending to be a sister. "I was very upset when I learned that Aunt Fan was poisoned, but don't worry, Aunt Fan, His Highness said that we will take strict measures on this matter if we investigate, we will definitely give Aunt Fan justice." Such a change from yesterday's aggressive Pan Yulu frightened Fan Swinning. Just now she looked at Pan Yulu with a sinister look, wishing she could chop her into pieces and feed her to the dogs. Why is it that in the blink of an eye, it's like a different person? Pan Yulu is sitting here just to hold Fan Swinning back. Fan Kinjao said, "As long as the goal can be achieved, so what if he kneels down and kowtows to Fan Swinning?" When Pan Yulu thought of Fan Kinjao's words, the corners of her lips twitched fiercely. Naturally, she couldn't do it like kneeling down to Fan Swinning, but she could still do it by pretending to smile and say all the nice things one made. Fan Swinning looked at Pan Yulu like this and thought it was a lie to say that she was not panicking. However, before she had time to think about it, she heard a commotion in the yard. Soon, the nanny next to Pan Yulu came through the door and said, "Third princess, I just found this thing in Queen's room." Fan Swinning didn't understand what was going on at first. When Pan Yulu took the thing and opened it in front of her, Fan Swinning felt that her heart was about to jump into her throat. This is the poison she made herself, how could she not recognize it? But how could this thing be found in her yard? Pan Yulu didn't seem to notice Fan Swinning's shock. She held her hand and said, "I thought about it carefully after I went back. Although Aunt Fan was poisoned yesterday, she can't just invite all the princes and concubines here after asking around. I thought of checking the people around Aunt Fan before making any plans, but I didn't expect that the people around Aunt Fan were really dirty. Perhaps there is some misunderstanding." Fan Swinning tried her best to defend. "Come here, report this matter to the third prince, and then invite the doctor back." Pan Yulu wanted to slap Fan Swinning on the face. Naturally, she would not listen to anything Fan Swinning said at this time. Not long after, Bailey Rongs, who was still in the front yard thinking about how to bring the matter to his father, stepped into Fan Swinning's yard under the attention of his servants. As soon as he entered the door, he heard the doctor stroking his white beard and saying, "This poison is indeed consistent with the poison in Aunt Fan." As soon as these words came out, Fan Swinning was directly thrown into the bottomless abyss. Bailey Rongs' face was so dark that it reflected light. Queun was so frightened that she knelt on the ground and cried, "It really has nothing to do with me. I was wronged." Seeing this, the nanny next to Pan Yulu also knelt on the ground. "Now that everyone has gained the stolen goods, how can I allow you to quibble?" Bailey Rongs looked at Fan Swinning on the bed. The tightness of his brows proved how disappointed he was at this moment. Fan Swinning shook her head and choked, "Your Highness, Third Prince, believe me. I really haven't done anything to regret you." The third prince and his concubine led people into the house and started a strict investigation. "I didn't even know I was out. What's going on?" Fan Swinning will naturally refuse to admit anything she has never done. After hearing this, Pan Yulu had to speak, "Your Highness, I just wanted to share your worries, so I thought of bringing someone over to have a look. Maybe there was something dirty in Aunt Fan's yard, but I didn't expect it to be true. The person who asked me to be my concubine was found. Everything I did was for this mansion. Bailey Rongs had a severe headache, but he also knew in his heart that since this man was found in Fan Swinning's yard, it would be impossible to turn things around no matter how much he tried. Come here, drag Kwi-un down and hit 20 big boards again, regardless of whether Kwi-un was wronged or not, since she became the trigger that ruined his plan, she deserved to die. Kwi-un was frightened and begged for help like crazy. But facing Bailey Rongs' rage, even Fan Swinning did not dare to speak without permission. Kwi-un was dragged out of the door, and soon, the yard was filled with wailing sounds and the heavy sound of boards falling on skin. Fan Swinning slumped on the bed with a pale face, staring quietly at Pan Yulu not far away. Of course she didn't believe that Kwi-un was hiding poison, so the only one who could do all this was the third prince's concubine. Could it be that the third princess discovered what she had hidden in advance, so she came to bite her back? But her things were hidden so secretly that at the beginning, the third prince and concubine had no suspicion at all. Pan Yulu looked at Fan Swinning's secretly panicked and suspicious look, and felt really viciously happy. Little bitch, you really have no good intentions. Fortunately, she was not so stupid this time and agreed to join forces with Fan Kinjao. Otherwise, when the Dongchuang incident happened, would she be the one who was dragged out to fight? When I think of Fan Kinjao, Pan Yulu's heart couldn't help but thump. No matter how powerful a person is, if he wants to get things done, he still has to move his fingers. But look at Fan Kinjao, he just moved his mouth and turned the tide. Looking at Fan Swinning's pale face again, Pan Yulu couldn't help but squeeze her hands under her sleeves. She should be more careful when facing Fan Kinjao again in the future. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 603. Chapter 603. This rumor is not quite right. Under Bailey Rongs' rage, Kwi-un was beaten 20 times. Just looking at Kwi-un lying in the yard, half-body soaked in blood, Bailey Rongs still felt uneasy, so he simply ordered Fan Swinning and Pan Yulu to be confined in his yard. Looking at Bailey Rongs' face filled with lightning and thunder, Pan Yulu and Fan Swinning were silent and did not dare to say anything. It was strange that Bailey Rongs' face improved after he farted with great force. Fan Kinjao didn't see Bailey Rongs' bitter and resentful face, and she didn't look at him either. But just letting him go like this is not Fan Kinjao's style. That night, Fan Kinjao wrote a letter and asked Texu to deliver it to Fenji Palace. Empress Zhengzi was shocked when she saw the letter. But after she calmed down, her brows were furrowed. The harm is not to the wife and children, and the crime is not to the parents. What is the third prince doing? Oh, now that she feels that her son is no longer taken seriously, she is about to attack Xiao Kinjao. Why doesn't a very grown-up man want a billion? Empress Zhengzi could not let her daughter-in-law be wronged, so she asked Beihe to spread the news in the palace overnight. You can imagine how angry concubine Yu was when she learned about this matter. After suppressing the matter, she sent Bailey Rongs to the palace and scolded her for a whole day in Yuyu Palace before she finally got over it. Guess. In Fenji Palace, Queen Zhen 11 finally saw a smile on her gloomy face after learning about this. As long as she knows that concubine Yu is unhappy, she will be happy. The more Empress Zhen 11 thought about it, the more she found it funny. She pulled Lily and said, "Not long ago, concubine Yu was eagerly looking at my jokes, but now she no longer has to look at other people. Her son is the best joke." Lily sighed after hearing the cause and effect. I didn't expect people's hearts to be so sinister. How could Aunt Fan from the third prince's mansion be so cruel and ruthless even though she is the sister of the crown princess? Queen Zhen 11 thought to herself, what's so strange about this? Even if he could even go into the palace and become the emperor's concubine, what else could Fan Swinning not do? After smiling, Queen Zhen 11 asked, "What's happening over there with the fifth prince?" After the fifth prince was banned by you, although the rumors in the city are still spreading, the people are obviously not so enthusiastic. Without seeing the person involved, even if rumors spread all over the place, the heat will be halved. Then let the fifth prince continue to stay in the mansion. The queen is not going to send someone to investigate. What's happening in the city is that there are rumors like this. If someone doesn't do it on purpose, who would believe it? But since it is a rumor, it is false. If this palace spends a lot of manpower to track down this matter, there will be another turmoil in the palace. Wouldn't it catch me off guard? It's better to be careful before Feng Ming comes back. Lily understands that the queen is worried about luring the tiger away from the mountain. At the same time, Fan Qinjiao also received the message from Yan Hanbei. Unexpectedly, Yan Hanbei is not very cool, but he is still very reliable in his work. A thick letter explaining in detail the causes and consequences of the fifth prince's incident. It turns out that when the fifth prince was traveling a few days ago, his horse was frightened and almost injured a woman. At the critical moment, the fifth prince rushed out of the carriage and hugged the woman away from the frightened horses. It was a small thing at first, but who knew it would be spread around. There are even rumors that the fifth prince has already fallen in love with the woman, and the so-called frightened horse is just a way for the fifth prince to get close to the woman. Yan Hanbei also said in the letter that there were many people who saw the fifth prince heroically saving the beauty, so when rumors spread, people would naturally believe it. However, Yan Hanbei tried every means and couldn't find anything else except knowing that the woman's surname was Liu. Fan Qinjiao looked at the letter in his hand and frowned slightly. Yan Hanbei Mingming said in the letter that those rumors were very detailed, and even the appearance of the frightened horse of the fifth prince and a few stray hairs were clearly spread. In other words, the fifth prince was stripped clean. Fan Qinjiao has also stood at the highest point of rumors and knows that being ripped off is normal. But it was obviously rumored that it was a matter between two people, but now only the fifth prince was raped, which is a bit abnormal. If the rumors in the city really intensify, how could they not know everything about the woman? Don't say that everyone's attention is on the fifth prince, that is simply unrealistic. Listening to rumors is like listening to stories. Who doesn't want to listen carefully and comprehensively? Unless someone deliberately covered up everything about the woman so that no one would be able to hear it even if they wanted to. Lanja, go to the fifth prince's residence and help me ask the fifth prince what's going on. The fifth prince has a close relationship with Bailey Fengming. This is something everyone knows. Now that Bailey Fengming has returned, the city is approaching, but the fifth prince accidentally made a rumor at this time. Whether it is coincidence or man-made, Fan Qinjiao cannot take it lightly. As soon as Lang Ya left, Ning Han opened the curtain and entered the door. "Miss, the sixth princess has sent you a message." Fan Qinjiao took the post and saw that not only his name was on it, but Sun Kentung's name was also on it, but the location was set at a tea house on the main street, not at the sixth prince's residence. In total, it had been a while since Zhang Yulan entered the sixth prince's residence. It seemed that Han Jingchen was feeling aggrieved, so she wanted to meet them out. Since he was meeting an acquaintance, Fan Qinjiao didn't pay much attention to it, so he simply packed up and got into the carriage. The western suburbs mansion is still some distance away from the main street. By the time Fan Qinjiao arrived at the tea house, Han Jingchen had already arrived. As soon as she saw Fan Qinjiao entering, Han Jingchen smiled and said, "I have heard that on the day when the third prince took a concubine, the crown prince was so powerful, and with the help of other princes and concubines, she was able to steal the show." Fan Qinjiao untied his cloak and hung it on a shelf nearby, smiling helplessly. "Seeing that you can still make fun of me proves that you are still in a good mood." Han Jingchen pulled Fan Qinjiao and sat on the stool. "Why am I in a bad mood? That Zhang Yulan married in, but so far she has not even been close to the sixth prince. I miss her. I gave up because of the difficulties and have been hiding in my yard these days. It is indeed good news, but Zhang Yulan is not someone who is easy to get rid of. You should be careful. Fan Qinjiao looked at Han Jingchen's face and felt that something was wrong. He looked carefully again. He grabbed her wrist and examined her carefully. Smooth communication should refer to smoothness, like beads rolling on a jade plate. This is end of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 604. Chapter 604. It turns out to be Princess Rui. Fan Qinjiao looked at Han Jingchen in surprise. Are you pregnant? Han Jingchen was not as surprised as Fan Qinjiao, but she was a little disappointed and said, either you should say that you shouldn't find a friend who knows medicine. Look, you saw through it before I even had time to announce the good news. Fan Qinjiao smiled and said, even if I see through it, I will still be happy. Does the sixth prince know about this? When Han Jingchen thought of her silly boy, she finally felt a little shy like a daughter. I only found out about it yesterday. She pulled me and talked about it all night. I originally wanted to ask the maid next to me to come back today. It would be nice to spread the news at home, but the sixth prince insists on coming to tell the news in person, and I can't stop him. The fact that the sixth prince can go to the Han mansion in person shows that he values you. It's good that only a child whose father values him can grow up happily. Of course Han Jingchen knew Fan Qinjiao's previous experiences, so she hurriedly held her hand and said, Qinjiao, are you unhappy? Fan Qinjiao held Han Jingchen's hand and said, what nonsense are you talking about? The past is in the past. If I'm still worried about it, it's because I have something to do with myself. But you have to take good care of yourself during this period. If you feel uncomfortable, send me a message immediately. Han Jingchen felt sour and warm in her heart when she saw that Fan Qinjiao kept caring about her. Don't worry, I'm 10 months pregnant and I can't let you rest. Fan Qinjiao smiled and said, I'm very happy. Han Jingchen saw Fan Qinjiao smiling, and she also laughed too. Her wish is really simple, that is, she hopes that everyone around her and she can find their own happiness. When Sun Kentong entered the door, he saw such a sensational scene. Seeing Han Jingchen and Fan Qinjiao's hands clasped together, Sun Kongtong was so sad that she couldn't help but say, I asked you two to pay more attention. If you didn't know better, I would have thought that you two were in love and were going to elope that night. Go. Han Jingchen rolled her eyes at Sun Kentong. Are you envious? I'm envious. Not only am I envious, but I also want you two to do well and take me with you to elope and travel around the world, Sun Kongtong said, and put his cold hands on her. Han Jingchen has always been a big-hearted person who only cares about laughing. Fan Qinjiao quickly held Sun Kentong's hand and said, don't let Jingchen get cold. She is very valuable now. Hearing this, Sun Kongtong still didn't understand anything, so he hurriedly called Han Jingchen to agree to become his godmother. Han Jingchen shook her head quickly, I don't want it. If you want to be a godmother, you have to find Qinjiao. You are so stupid yourself, why do you want to take my child with you? Sun Kongtong was not angry after hearing this. Forget it. If you don't agree, I can give birth myself anyway. Han Jingchen and Fan Qinjiao were both stunned when they heard this. Sun Kongtong also knew that she seemed to have said the wrong thing, but she did not intend to keep it a secret, so she told her about getting married. The other party was her cousin. The relationship between the two families had always been good, and I grew up with my cousin as childhood sweethearts, so we are familiar with each other's temperaments and temperaments. Fan Qinjiao and Han Jingchen were stunned for a long time before they both held Sun Kentong's hand. Although they didn't say anything, they were happy and joyful for each other and couldn't hide their excitement and trembling. Sun Kongtong also thought that when she had an accident, Fan Qinjiao and Han Jingchen were by her side. Thinking about it, her eyes became red. Fan Qinjiao looked at the moist eyes of Sun Kentong and Han Jingchen, and felt a little choked. There have been many bumps and bruises along the way. Fortunately, everyone's outcome is good. The days in winter are short, and it would be dark after just a few people chatting for a while. A few people walked out of the tea house no matter how reluctant they were to leave. The stairs in this tea house are not very spacious. When a few people were about to go downstairs, they happened to see someone going up. Fan Kinjao and Sun Kantong were both concerned about Han Jingchen's health, so they stood aside to protect her. It's just that the person going upstairs didn't seem to be in a hurry. He stood in the middle of the stairs for a long time and didn't take a few steps. Sun Kantong just couldn't stand it any longer and urged at the top of his lungs, "Can those downstairs hurry up? Didn't you see that there are still people upstairs waiting to go down?" Sun Kantong's words were not polite, but after all, those who stood in the way were at fault first, and Fan Kinjao didn't intend to stop anything. As the words fell, there were footsteps in the middle of the stairs, obviously walking upstairs. Sun Kantong saw the people moving downstairs and didn't think much. He walked towards the stairs first, wanting to stand at the corner in the middle of the stairs first, and then wait to help Han Jingchen down. At this moment, a man and a woman also came to the corner of the stairs. Both the man and the woman are well dressed, but compared with the man's fair and soft face, the woman obviously looks much older. From Fan Kinjao's angle, he could only see the side face of the woman clearly, and just when he thought she looked familiar, the woman raised her arm, and when she passed by Sun Kantong, she hit Sun Kantong hard in the chest with her elbow. Sun Kantong didn't expect that this man would do it as soon as he said it. He grimaced in pain and asked, "Why do you hit someone?" The woman laughed when she heard this. "The stairs are narrow, and bumps are unavoidable. If this girl is really so squeamish, wouldn't it be better to just stay at home and not go out? How do you talk? The girl has been aggressive all the time, why do you blame me again?" Han Jingchen was also very anxious when she saw Sun Kantong's pale face. It was obvious that the woman had done that on purpose, and now she was still righteously calling Sun Kantong a pig. How could there be such an unreasonable person in this world? But before Han Jingchen could speak, Fan Kinjao said, "Kantong, don't be rude." Han Jingchen. Sun Kantong. What's the situation? Sun Kantong and Han Jingchen both wondered why Fan Kinjao helped the woman, but they believed that Fan Kinjao would never do this for no reason, so although they had doubts in their hearts, they kept their mouths shut in front of them. When the woman saw that Sun Kantong had stopped talking, she just thought that these people were frightened by her. She curled her lips proudly and pulled the man beside her to continue going up the stairs. However, when she looked up, she saw a familiar figure. When their eyes met, the woman was startled. Fan Kinjao was the first to laugh, even though Prince Rui is no longer alive, and Prince Rui's son has gone down to keep him company, Princess Rui is still as charming as ever. Princess Rui. As soon as these words came out, Sun Kantong and Han Jingchen were stunned. The young man next to Princess Rui seemed to be surprised as well, looking blankly at the woman next to her. Princess Rui squeezed the handkerchief in her hand, her clenched teeth wanted to bite down on Fan Kinjao's body bit by bit. "What do you want?" Even if she hates Fan Kinjao now, Fan Kinjao's identity is no longer something she can touch. Fan Kinjao's purpose is simple, to apologize. Princess Rui almost died of anger on the spot. "Don't push yourself too far." Sun Kantong was not afraid of making things worse, but when she thought of the identities of Fan Kinjao and Han Jingchen, she still came over and said softly, "Kinjao, why don't you forget it, I'm not hurt anyway." After hearing this, Princess Rui became hardened. "I heard that the crown princess will get married in a grand ceremony next year. If it is known that the crown princess bullies others at this time, I wonder if the royal family will want someone with a higher eye than the top daughter-in-law." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 605. Chapter 605 is a clear threat to you. Of course Han Jingchen didn't believe that the royal family would cancel the marriage because of this disappearance, but Princess Rui was right about one thing. People like them who married into the royal family were most afraid of causing trouble. I think it's getting late, let's go first. Han Jingchen took Fan Qingjiao's hand. Now Princess Rui has only an empty name left, and she caused a lot of trouble for such a person. It's really impossible to do this. Fan Qingjiao, however, stood still and said, if Princess Rui is not afraid of causing trouble, I will certainly not be afraid either. I just don't know how Princess Rui will explain to the people around her. The husband is gone, the son is dead, who is this man now? Looking at the man's obedient look with his head lowered and silent throughout the whole process, it was obvious what kind of relationship he had with Princess Rui. Sure enough, a hint of guilt flashed in Princess Rui's eyes. Are you threatening me? Fan Qingjiao nodded, confidently, it's just a threat. Did Princess Rui just hear it? Princess Rui? Who can lend her a knife? Han Jingchen and Sun Kantong, who had just persuaded Fan Qingjiao to take a step back, heard this and began tracing the man's body with wide eyes. So, this guy is the pretty boy raised by Princess Rui. As if they had been connected to the two branches of Ren and Governor, Han Jingchen and Sun Kangtong stopped persuading them. Even if there is only an empty title left on Princess Rui's head, she is the daughter-in-law who has entered the royal family tree. If this matter is taken seriously, it would be a minor matter for Princess Rui to have a layer of her skin peeled off. Princess Rui's hair stood on end when she was looked at by 3 people and 6 pairs of eyes. Even if she was filled with anger, she could no longer burn it out. Almost gritting her teeth, Princess Rui walked up to Sun Kantong and said, it was my fault just now. Sun Kantong. Being apologized by the princess is something I would never dream of. Han Jingchen saw that Princess Rui also gave in, so she looked at Fan Qingjiao and said, let's go too. Fan Qingjiao originally just wanted to win a breath, and he didn't really plan to do anything to Princess Rui. Seeing the 3 people go downstairs, Princess Rui had to learn her lesson this time and took the initiative to retreat to the corner with the man. She closed her eyes and gritted her teeth and said to Fan Qingjiao to get out of here. However, the man standing next to Princess Rui quietly looked at Fan Qingjiao with his eyelids raised. Fan Qingjiao didn't like this kind of voyeuristic observation. He glanced indifferently and realized that the man lowered his head before continuing downstairs with Sun Kangtong and Han Jingchen. When we returned to the mansion, it was completely dark. As soon as Fan Qingjiao returned to the yard, Lang Ya, who had been waiting in the yard for a long time, followed him. Seeing that Lang Ya had been following the young lady, Nanny Su guessed that something important was going on and hurriedly sent all the servants away in the yard. Sure enough, as soon as Lanja entered the door, he said, Miss, the 5th prince said he had no idea. In fact, Lang Ya said this quite implicitly. Bailey Lingyu's original words were that he didn't even know whether the woman was round or flat. At that time, the horse was frightened, and Bailey Lingyu did rush out of the carriage to save the person, but due to the difference between men and women, he just blocked the person behind him, without even touching her with a finger. As a result, such rumors spread in the main city for some reason. A few days ago, the emperor summoned Bailey Lingyu to the palace, thinking that he might just get married. One can imagine how angry Bailey Lingyu was. The emperor was also very angry after being sternly rejected by Bailey Lingyu. In the end, the empress came forward and suggested that Bailey Lingyu return to his mansion to think about his mistakes behind closed doors. Things turned out to be simpler than Fan Qingjiao thought, but Fan Qingjiao's heart became heavier. Princes may not always get married in a legitimate manner. There is no precedent in Ziliang that the concubine enters the house first and then marries the principal concubine. The emperor was far less wary of the 5th prince than he was of the others, and it was not impossible for him to get his son married as soon as possible if he showed a little paternal love. If he were an ordinary father, Fan Kinjao would certainly not think much about it. But the fifth prince's father is the emperor. He is the 95-year-old lord of Ziliang. Those who can get a marriage from the emperor are not princesses and concubines, and who are not of noble status and family status. As for the woman who was rumored to be having an affair with the fifth prince, the emperor wanted to marry her, so how could she not make people worry too much? It seems that the emperor already knows the identity of the woman. Moreover, the woman's status is worthy of the emperor's marriage. Even if the famous ladies in the main city keep a low profile, they always have traces to follow, but that woman has never been able to find out. Fan Kinjao narrowed his eyes slightly. This matter is really getting more and more interesting. Miss, do you plan to continue to investigate? Lang Ya asked, indicating that he was ready to investigate in person. Fan Kinjao said, let's put this matter aside for now. The empress circled the fifth prince in order to dispel the rumors in the city little by little. And looking at the current situation, the people who want to promote this matter do not seem to intend to continue to bite on it. Since the queen has intervened, Fan Kinjao can't help but cause trouble. Besides, there are just rumors in the city now. Even if something is really found, it will be harmless. By then, not only will the problem not be solved, but the problem will be alarmed. It's better to wait and see. When that person makes any other big moves, it won't be too late to see him again. Miss, I want you to go to the study room. Nanny Sue's voice sounded outside the door. Fan Kinjao knew that his grandfather would never go to the study with her easily, so he immediately put on his shawl and went out. In the study, Hua Yaoding and Tao Yuxian were both there. Fan Kinjao first stepped forward and bowed his knees to say hello. My granddaughter would like to say hello to my grandfather and grandmother. Tao Yuxian took Fan Kinjao's hand and pulled her to sit next to him. It should be a good thing. Fan Kinjao was stunned and looked at his grandfather in confusion. Hua Yaoding didn't sell the lawsuit either. Prince Heshuo just sent someone to deliver the news, saying that the prince personally delivered the letter to the palace and is scheduled to arrive in the main city on the night of Little New Year's Eve. Fan Kinjao thought to himself, this is indeed good news. But there was no smile on her face. Obviously, my grandfather did not finish what he said. And if you just want to tell her the news that Bailey Fengming has returned to the city, there is no need to go to such trouble. Hua Yaoding looked at Fan Kinjao in silence, and then there was no movement. Tao Yuxian frowned and looked at her husband. What about the second part of the sentence? Can you eat it? Hua Yaoding sighed. If Xiao Kinjao was like other female dolls, with her own joy in her head, he could still use an educational tone to ask her to think about the overall situation, but now this child is silent and clearly just waiting for him to continue talking, so obedient and sensible, how could he open his mouth? Tao Yuxian. Oh, you feel sorry for me, don't I feel sorry for you? But the matter is there, how can it be solved by feeling distressed? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 606. Chapter 606 Taking the initiative to postpone the wedding. Hua Yaoding also understood this truth. Although he felt sorry for his granddaughter, the matter was so important, he still said seriously, today, the court received a message from Subay. Originally, there was an insect plague in the middle of summer. Now that winter has come, there are constant snowstorms, and the disaster situation in Subay is becoming more and more serious. Countless people there have starved to death. Fan Kinjao's reaction was always quick. Grandpa, did you say you received the message today? Hua Yaoding nodded. Fan Kinjao just understood. The local disaster was caused by the imperial court's negligence, otherwise it would not have been delayed from summer to winter. But now that things have started to break out, the court will not sit idly by and ignore it. The person sitting on the dragon throne is always selfish. When something goes wrong, he will not think that it is his own delay and neglect, but will only find a scapegoat to vent his anger. The upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked. The ministers in the court knew the emperor's temperament, and in order to please Long Xian, they would take the initiative to help find a scapegoat. Now, the news that Bailey Fengming has returned to the palace coincides with the disaster in Subei. With all these things before his eyes, what else does Fan Qinjiao not understand? Grandpa, don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? The disaster in Subei lasted from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, but it happened that at the most serious time, the post happened to coincide with Bailey Fengming's letter returning to the city. Fan Qing, it's not that Yao doesn't believe in coincidences in this world, but things that are too coincidental are still worth pondering. Hua Yaoding nodded and said, I and Prince Heshuo also had doubts about this matter, but now that both matters have been brought to the attention of the emperor, it is too late to pursue them. Besides, what the emperor now wants is someone to help him take care of the people's anger, and does not care whether someone framed the prince. Of course Fan Qinjiao understands this. And looking at my grandfather's expression, I'm afraid he has already made up his mind. Since the problem comes from the timing of the letter, writing a letter to Bailey Fengming at this time should be consistent with the outside. It is simply knowing that there are tigers in the mountains and preferring to travel to the tiger mountains. And if you don't alarm, you can still stop the mouths of the ministers in the court, and even make the emperor's eyes on Bailey Fengming change from anger to relief. Fan Qinjiao only thought of one way, postponing the wedding until the disaster in Subei is resolved. As soon as these 4 words came out, Hua Yaoding and Tao Yuxian were shocked. After a long time, Hua Yaoding finally opened his mouth to confirm, Xiao Qinjiao, what did you say? The result of his discussions with Prince Heshuo was indeed to delay the wedding. But what they wanted to do was to use this method to let the prince escape first, and he would only be able to survive for a few months. In the end, Xiao Qinjiao said that he would wait until the disaster was over. This was so cruel that even Hua Yaoding didn't know what to say. Tao Yuxian turned to look at Fan Qinjiao. Xiao Qinjiao, you have to think carefully. The disaster in Subei did not happen overnight. Even if the court takes over now, it will only take a few days to completely quell the disaster. Grandma said it is true, but I feel that the longer it is delayed, the more beneficial it will be. The disaster situation in Subei is certainly difficult, but it is precisely because of the difficulty that it is easier to win public support for Bailey Fengming. On the road to imperial power, the emperor's attention is indeed important, but if you want to be more stable, military success and popular support are fundamental. If Bailey Fengming can really win the hearts of the people on this matter, in the future, unless Bailey Fengming makes an unforgivable mistake, not even the emperor will be able to depose the prince. Hua Yaoding and Tao Yuxian looked at each other, which clearly showed the distress and shock in the other's eyes. For women, getting married is the most important event in life. If this matter had happened to another woman, I am afraid she would have wanted to marry into the royal family in a matter of minutes. The result is placed here at Xiao Qinjiao. It was enough not to cry or make trouble, and even more so, he used the postponement of the wedding to strive for the best interests of the prince. Tao Yuxian boasts that he does not have this kind of courage. Fan Qinjiao saw the distress in the eyes of his 2 grandfathers, and said with a faint smile, if I can get the benefits I calculated, I am the winner. Since I am the winner, how can I talk about feeling distressed? Now my uncles are still living outside. Even if it is a big wedding, I may not be able to really laugh, so it is better to take the opportunity to plan more for the prince. Only when the prince's foundation is more stable, the uncles will see each other again. Fan Qinjiao believes that as long as he can meet his expectations, everything will be worth it. but it was this kind of her that made the two elders of the Hua family even more distressed and felt their chests became tight. How many lifetimes of blessings did the Hua family have to acquire to have such a smart and filial grandson? Since Fan Qinjiao had already given a positive reply, Hua Yaoding went to Heshuo County Prince's mansion to discuss the matter that night. Fan Qinjiao returned to the yard and did not fall asleep immediately. Instead, he started grinding and picked up his pen. Now that Bailey Fengming is favored, there are many jealous people. But deliberately delaying the prince's letter to return to the city, and therefore crashing the car with Sub-A, seems clever but is actually stupid. Since the emperor's attention to the prince did not happen overnight, he will never completely neglect the prince because of a trivial matter. Even though the emperor now desperately needs someone to vent his anger, the emperor still knows Bailey Fengming's innocence in his heart. It is even entirely possible that after the limelight of Sub-A passes, he will pay more attention to Bailey Fengming because of the guilt in his heart. Bailey Rongs would never take risks on risky matters. Concubine Yu was stared at by the queen in the palace, and it was impossible to stretch out such a long hand. In this way, only the fifth prince, the second prince, the sixth prince, the eldest prince and the eighth prince are left. It goes without saying that the fifth prince would never do this. The second prince and the sixth prince have always been transparent in the court, and there is no need to take risks. The eldest prince has been demoted, so even if he had the intention to frame him, he would still be unable to do so. In this case, only one person is left. Eighth prince. Fan Qinjiao will not forget that the eighth prince's concubine said a few days ago that the eighth prince was sent to the official post. After writing the letter, Fan Qinjiao handed it to Ning Tian. Be sure to give this letter to the eighth prince concubine personally. If the eighth prince concubine goes out to inquire about you within a quarter of an hour, give this to her again. As Fan Qinjiao spoke, he took out a small porcelain bottle from the medicine shelf next to him. Ning Tian nodded, took the letter and went out. At this midnight, the eighth prince was still very surprised to receive the letter from the crown princess. But after she opened the letter and read it, the eighth prince and concubine were no longer surprised. The eighth princess was shocked. Okay. In the letter, the crown princess briefly and easily explained what happened, and then asked the eighth princess to help verify it. Eighth princess. What else should I check? The eighth prince was at the official post, but the prince's letter was delayed. Isn't this just a lice on a bald man's head? It's an obvious thing. Had it not been made of her own mallet, the eighth prince would have cut off her head and used it as a stool to sit on. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 607. Chapter 607 How many donkeys were kicked? The eighth princess knew that by telling her the news, she was selling her a favor. If the crown princess really brought the matter directly to concubine Jiangshu, even she would not be able to live with it. Feeling grateful for the good deeds of the crown princess, the eighth prince and concubine immediately chased her out in person wearing a cloak. Then, she got the small porcelain bottle from Ningtian's hand. The wind outside is cold, and the small porcelain bottle in my hand is biting. The eighth prince's concubine returned to the mansion and happened to see a servant going to the study to deliver supper to the eighth prince. Looking at the steaming soup on the tray, the eighth prince finally opened the small porcelain bottle in her hand. Since the eighth prince has done something, the crown princess will not stand idly by. However, the crown princess showed her favor and would not let her kill the eighth prince herself. So she knew that the contents of this small porcelain bottle, even to death, would only serve as a lesson to the eighth prince. The eighth princess also didn't want to, but she had no choice. If she didn't do as she was told and wait for the crown princess to take action, the eighth prince might not even be able to survive. Fan Qinjiao followed the trend and postponed the wedding to gain more benefits for Bailey Fengming, but this did not mean that the sand raised by the eighth prince could continue to fascinate her eyes. If this incident does not teach the eighth prince a painful lesson, How can the eighth prince be honest? Fan Qinjiao looked at Ningtian, who was coming back next to him, and asked softly, "When did the eighth prince come out to look for you?" Ningtian thought for a while and said, "It's less than a quarter of an hour." In summary, the eighth prince's concubine should have gone out to look for someone after reading the letter. From this point of view, the eighth prince's concubine is indeed flexible and smart, and Fan Qinjiao's favor to her is not in vain. The night passed quickly, and early the next morning, the news of the postponement of the prince's wedding bombarded the court. The prince of Heshuo County expressed his sincerity and righteousness. Although the prince was not in the main city, his heart was always close to the court. Moreover, the journey to the north did not happen overnight. The prince has been thinking about it for a long time. However, the prince knew that he was not capable of doing what he wanted, so he could only ask for a delay. A big wedding to calm the people of Subei. Hearing this, Hua Yaoding naturally stood up and strongly opposed it. Oh, his granddaughter can marry if she wants, and delay if she wants. Do you think that the Hua family is easy to bully? Even if it is really necessary to delay, the emperor will have to speak. Emperor Yongchang was pleased with the prince's move and immediately agreed to postpone the wedding. Seeing this, Hua Yaoding acted obediently. But when facing Prince Heshuo, Hua Yaoding still looked angry, and even kicked Prince Heshuo in the waist. Prince Heshuo immediately lay on the ground and fainted from anger. The third prince and his party, who got the news yesterday, originally thought of taking advantage of this matter today to slap a few hats on the prince, but now, where else to deduct it? I have been listening to the quarrel between General Hua and Prince Heshuo all morning. They didn't even have a chance to speak. It's just that the emperor not only pursued the case, but also specifically ordered the imperial doctor to go to the outpatient clinic for Prince Heshuo, and even personally called Hua Yaoding to the imperial study to comfort him. Seeing the emperor's attitude, the three princes and his party had to keep their mouths shut even if they had the chance to speak. Obviously the emperor is very satisfied with this result. Have they lived enough to dare to go against the emperor? Emperor Yongchang was certainly happy. The prince took the initiative to postpone the wedding and successfully calmed the public sentiment in Subei. Looking at the Hua family's attitude, it was obvious that they were disgusted with the prince's private decision. Emperor Yongchang originally asked Fan Qinjiao to marry the prince in order to keep both parties in check and monitor each other. Naturally, the more tense the relationship between the Hua family and the prince is, the more antagonistic the effect between Fan Qinjiao and the prince will be. In this way, Emperor Yongchang was reaping the benefits. How could he not be happy? In just half a day, the news of the postponement of the prince's wedding spread throughout the main city. In the eighth prince's mansion, it was the eighth prince who was bedridden. He had been suffering from diarrhea and vomiting all night last night. He finally calmed down a bit today, and finally heard the news. Like the eighth prince who was struck by lightning, he almost fainted without losing his eyesight. He spent so much effort, time, and money to delay the prince's letter. The result is this now. The eighth prince's concubine who was waiting at the side looked at the eighth prince who was struck by lightning, and felt extremely happy. When the prince is in the spotlight, he doesn't think about how to curry favor with the prince, but instead secretly makes small moves. The most important thing is that I still don't understand. You have to be kicked by a few donkeys to become so stupid. It is nothing more than a good thing that the crown princess's laxative can purge him of his stupidity. Concubine Zhang Shu, who was in the palace, heard that her son fell ill, and went to beg the emperor in person, hoping that the emperor would allow her to bring the imperial doctor to the house to treat her son. Emperor Yongchang was happy now, so he agreed to concubine Zhang Shu's request. As soon as concubine Zhang Shu entered the door, she saw her son who had lost weight on the bed, and hurriedly asked the prince to go for diagnosis and treatment. The eighth prince's concubine was afraid that her mother-in-law would cause too much trouble and cause extraneous matters, so she called her mother-in-law behind the screen while the imperial doctor was diagnosing and treating her, and told her the whole story. Of course, in order to avoid being scolded, the eighth princess deliberately replaced her ignorance with earnest persuasion to no avail. Concubine Jiangshu was stunned when she heard this. So you are saying, this was intentional by the crown princess? The eighth princess nodded and said, fortunately, it's not poison, it's just a laxative. Zhang Shifei never expected that her son could do such a stupid thing. Fortunately, the crown princess suppressed this matter. What would she do if it really happened in front of the empress? The imperial doctor quickly gave a diagnosis, saying that the eighth prince had diarrhea caused by eating something unclean, and that he would be fine as long as he rested for a few days. Hearing this, the eighth prince's concubine felt even more nervous. How the eighth prince became this virtuous, she knew better than anyone else. But the imperial doctor did not diagnose it at all, which is enough to see the crown princess's medical skills and methods. Zhang Shifei looked at her son who was dying on the bed, feeling distressed and angry. But she didn't say a word and left with the imperial doctor. If he can't give himself some pain this time and have some memory, he may cause some trouble in the future. The world only knows the cruelty of the struggle for imperial power, but they don't know that the cannon fodder lying under the chair is the most bloody. Zhang Shifei climbed up step by step from the bottom, so of course she understands the dangers of people's hearts. That's why she didn't want her son to become a stepping stone for others to seize power. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 608. Chapter 608 Happy Events of the Hua Family. The fight between Hua Yaoding and Prince Heshuo in the court hall caused a storm in the city. But just like that, the news that the prince delayed his wedding because of the disaster in Subei also became more and more popular. Fan Qinjiao, as the goddaughter of the Prince of Heshuo County, came to express condolences in person on behalf of the Hua family. Result: I saw that the adoptive father who was rumored by the people and who should have been lying in bed and recuperating was sitting on a soft couch, drinking heavily and eating large pieces of meat. Seeing Fan Qinjiao coming, Prince Heshuo quickly asked him to stay and have dinner together. During the dinner, Prince Heshuo kept talking about how he discussed with Hua Yaoding yesterday and so on. Princess of Heshuo County. You are so dazzling at your age, I blush for you. By the time Fan Qinjiao left the Heshuo County prince's mansion, it was already dark. Sitting in the carriage and looking at the quiet street, Fan Qinjiao tiredly sat on the soft couch and closed his eyes. No matter how thrilling the process is, it is enough as long as the ending is good. Now, I just need to wait for Bailey Fengming to return to the city safely. A quarter of an hour later, the carriage arrived at the western suburbs mansion smoothly. Fan Qinjiao originally wanted to go back to his yard, but when he entered the mansion, he realized that the entire mansion was brightly lit, but there was no servant at all. How could Fan Qinjiao go back to his own yard like this? So he hurriedly turned around and went to the main yard. As a result, the main courtyard was empty. Fan Qinjiao hurriedly went to his aunt's yard again, but still couldn't see them. At this moment, Fan Qinjiao was lying when he said he was not panic, and he hurriedly walked to his brother's yard. Unexpectedly, as soon as I entered the courtyard, I saw that it was full of people. When the servants in the yard saw Fan Qinjiao, they all bowed their heads to say hello, I've met Miss Wei. Fan Qinjiao looked through the window and saw the crowds of people in his brother's house. He didn't have time to ask his servants what happened, so he just stepped in the door while holding up his skirt. Although Hua Fengming did not expand his yard after getting married, the house was still large enough. As a result, now it is so crowded that everyone can hardly turn around. At this time, not only the aunts and Mu Yan were there, but also the grandmother, and even the grandfather who basically didn't care about the backyard affairs was also there. It was Wu Qiuzao who was surrounded by people. When he saw Fan Qinjiao coming in, he hurriedly said, Qinjiao, please come and save me. I really can't handle it. Everyone couldn't help laughing when they heard this. Tao Yuxian, who was sitting next to the bed, said softly, "Our Hua family has not had a new member for a long time. Nowadays, everyone is here to celebrate this great good thing. You don't need to be too nervous. From now on, every day I will always take your pulse." Timing import. Hearing these words, Fan Kinjao realized that his sister-in-law was pregnant. No wonder every yard along the way is empty. It's indeed a happy event. Congratulations to my sister-in-law. Fan Kinjao walked to his grandmother's side and congratulated her sincerely. Wu Qiuzhao also heard that Fan Kinjao's wedding was postponed, and he felt a little sorry. It's just that she's pregnant, and it's not like she can't move her hands and feet. Besides, the child is still small now, even if she wants to pay attention to it, etc. It won't be too late when the month is over. Everyone listened to this in silence. The wedding over there has just been postponed, and here she is pregnant. Whoever this happens to will have a hard time. Even Mu Yan, who was the least expressive, looked at her third sister with worry on her face. Tao Yuxian knew what was going on, but he couldn't really tell the truth. Hua Yaoding looked at the worried faces of everyone and was speechless. I guess these people can't even think of it after thinking about it. It was Fan Kinjao's own idea to postpone the wedding. Fan Kinjao didn't know her family's concerns, but she didn't want to be the object of everyone's fear. My sister-in-law doesn't study medicine and doesn't understand the importance of reincarnation. Not only must she be careful at all times, but she must also take good care of her body so that she can be safe at home. There is no need to worry since people know a lot about medicine, but if my sister-in-law is really annoyed by the people in the house, she is welcome to take refuge at my place at any time. It was half serious and half joking, but it made everyone in the room laugh. Wu Qiuzhao was relieved when he saw that the smile on Fan Kinjao's face was not really forced. At this moment, Hua Fengning walked in despite the cold wind. Hua Fengning was also frightened when he saw so many people in the room at once. When everyone saw Hua Fengning's shocked look, they burst into laughter again. Hua Fengning. Who can tell him what's going on? Because the mansion in the western suburbs where the uncles had an accident, Wu Qiuzhou's pregnancy added rare laughter. Seeing that the new year is getting closer and closer, the old lady of the Zhou family also brought the eldest lady of the Zhou family to visit the house in person, and sent a lot of New Year's goods to the Hua family as an in-law. Although the man's family repeatedly visited the woman's house to show their respect for the woman, and there was no need to return the favor, Tao Yuxian still brought his fourth daughter-in-law Yafu to the Zhou family's door the next day. The days are getting colder day by day, and Bailey Fengming's return date is getting closer. Emperor Yongchang has been in a very good mood these past few days, and there is peace everywhere. Those civil servants who had been trying to flatter the emperor took the initiative to propose that a banquet should be held in the palace to take advantage of the prince's joyful return to the city in his young year. These words touched the heart of Emperor Yongchang, and he immediately ordered his people to make preparations. This is a hardship for the princes and concubines who have just entered the house. They have to rush into the palace to help with arrangements all day long. Except for the pregnant sixth princess Han Jingchen, the other princes and concubines entered the palace before dawn every day. They waited until it was completely dark before they could return to the mansion exhausted. Although Fan Kinjao has never been married, since all the ceremonies from the Ministry of Rites have been completed, and the emperor has given permission for her to change her story, she has to enter the palace separately from the other princes and concubines. Since the emperor attaches great importance to the prince's return to the city, the concubines in each palace are also cautious. Just like this, the matters that the princes and concubines need to be responsible for become a bit tricky. In addition to the decoration in the palace, there are also food and drinks for the day. No one likes to touch imported things. There was a banquet in the palace that day, and not only the royal family was present, but also first and second rank ministers and family members were invited. If there was a mistake in the food, it would be the crime of annihilation for the Nine clan. The princes and concubines are not stupid, so no one is willing to take on this hot potato. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 609. Chapter 609. The Royal Daughter-in-Law's Porridge. While everyone was discussing, Pan Yulu, who was sitting next to concubine Yu, suddenly said, "The crown princess is the senior one among the sisters-in-law, and the crown princess usually handles things very safely. According to my daughter-in-law's advice, this time, it's appropriate to leave the matter to the crown princess." Concubine Yu felt very comfortable hearing these words. She looked at Pan Yulu beside her with a smile and said, "I just happened to think of this, but I didn't expect you to take the lead. It may seem like a joke, but it makes a statement." The eighth prince originally wanted to help Fan Kinjao evade, but concubine Yu agreed. If a daughter-in-law of a younger generation objected, wouldn't she be seeking death? The second princess also remained silent and did not speak, completely acting like a wooden figure. On this occasion, concubine Zhongshu and concubine Han Xian found it difficult to talk. Pan Yulu saw that no one in the palace spoke to refute, so she stood up and wanted to bow to Fan Kinjao Yingying. In this way, the crown princess has to work hard. Before she could finish her words, Fan Kinjao stood up and took Pan Yulu's hand. "I am happy that the third prince believes in me, but there are still many things that are wrong with this matter. How can one or two be improved? The decision is made in just one sentence." As Fan Kinjao spoke, he pulled Pan Yulu up with all his strength. How could Pan Yulu have imagined that Fan Kinjao would be so strong? It was just can't struggle. So much so that her knees were bent just now, but now she is standing straight. Looking at the funny look of the third prince's concubine, the eighth prince's concubine almost stopped laughing. That day at the third prince's residence, the crown princess was killing all the guests. I don't know how the third prince's head was beaten before he dared to challenge the crown princess. Of course Pan Yulu understands Fan Kinjao's methods, and she doesn't want to take the initiative to become Fan Kinjao's enemy, but now concubine Yu is sitting next to her and staring helplessly. Whether she is showing her filial piety or her position, she must say this. Among all the sisters-in-law, the crown princess is the most prudent and handles things extremely safely. On the day when the third prince took in his concubine, if anyone else came to the house, they would probably be blamed for their lack of etiquette, but the crown princess was it's different, and it completely demonstrates its unique style, which makes people convinced. These words are completely accusing Fan Kinjao of transgressing. If you taste it carefully, you can also taste the flavor that alludes to Fan Kinjao's use of power to bully others. Hearing this, concubine Yu asked unconsciously, "What do you mean by this?" Pan Yulu quickly recounted everything that happened that day when the third prince took his concubine. Concubine Yu smiled after listening carefully. "I didn't expect the crown princess to care so much about my sister, but if I hadn't..." Before concubine Yu could finish her words, Queen Zhen 11 interrupted her directly. "Everyone is gathered together today to discuss the banquet in the palace. If concubine Yu wants to make things normal, she can wait until after the discussion. It's okay to just have a little chat." Concubine Yu smiled coldly. "What do you mean, Queen? Do you think I am no longer qualified to ask about the matters in my son's house?" Concubine Yu is qualified to ask questions, but I believe that the overall situation should be more important now. If the emperor asks, it will be difficult for me to speak for concubine Yu. There was a smile on Queen Zhen 11's face. "No matter how strong it is, the words you say will be harsh. Everyone in the palace knows how concerned the emperor is about the banquet. If you are not afraid of the emperor's blame, you can continue to do your housework. Of course, I am willing to sit here and watch you die." The other concubines looked at the scene and all sat aside, pretending to be deaf and mute. Concubine Yu's face changed slightly at the rebuke, but she didn't dare to continue to delay the situation. Concubine Panda wanted to smooth things over at this time. I think the proposal made by the third prince and concubine just now is very good. The princess has always been dignified and steady, so I can feel at ease if I let the prince concubine take charge of the food at the banquet. What concubine Panda said is really funny. Now the distinguished guests from the Genii kingdom are still in the palace. Who knows whether they will attend the banquet that day? The crown princess is our future face in Ziliang. If the emperor summons her to attend, how could concubine Panda do you want the crown princess to come to the audience with a horse spoon in one hand and a back shovel in the other? Concubine Jiangshu saw that concubine Panda was speaking out, so she was not to be outdone. Some time ago, her tiger son caused trouble for the prince. At this time, of course she had to risk her life to sell it to the prince. Zhang Shifei, you are simply using strong words to make excuses. Why did concubine Panda speak? Oh, what you said was reasonable. I just had some rebuttals that were unreasonable. If this is really the case, I think even the queen will have to retreat when concubine Panda is present in the future. Pandi Fi. Who can lend her a needle and thread so that I can sew the mouth of this lowly creature together? Pan Yulu did not expect that because of her suggestion, the commotion in the palace would reach such an extent. In a blink of an eye, she quietly looked at concubine Yu next to her and saw that concubine Yu was secretly winking at her. Pan Yulu quickly knelt on the ground and said, "Please, queen, please calm down, concubines. It's all the daughter-in-law's fault. It's the daughter-in-law who is responsible for everything. It was easy to think that my daughter-in-law took the initiative to apologize and knelt outside the palace, which was regarded as an apology." Concubine Yu looked at Pan Yulu who was kneeling down and sighed helplessly. "If it were some other small mistake, I might be able to help you beg the queen for mercy, but you shouldn't, absolutely shouldn't. No, it's time to give instructions to the crown princess. So what if you have good intentions, as the crown princess's status requires even this palace to look down upon you, so there's no way you can suggest that." Those who don't know this may think that Fan Kinjao is going to heaven just because of his status as the crown princess. With the singing and harmony of concubine Yu, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, even the queen mother was involved. If Pan Yulu really knelt outside the palace, the matter would soon spread throughout the palace. By then, both the Empress and Fan Kinjao would be charged with bullying other concubines based on their status. Empress Zhen 11 glanced at Fan Kinjao lightly, her eyes extremely obscure. Fan Kinjao rolled his eyebrows, then stood up and said, "It is my blessing and honor to be respected by the concubines and the other sisters-in-law in the palace. However, I am not good at eating. I am afraid that I will make a fool of myself." The third prince's concubine suggested this because she must have her own opinions on eating. In that case, why not ask the third prince's concubine to take charge of the food together with me? Pan Yulu can lower his attitude, and Fan Kinjao can lower his attitude even lower. As long as Pan Yulu dares to refuse, it means that she does not take the crown princess seriously. Pan Yulu. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 610. Chapter 610, Raising You Until You Are Fat and White. Faced with Fan Kinjao's proposal, Pan Yulu naturally wanted to refuse. But without giving her a chance to speak, concubine Yu just agreed. Now that Pan Yulu is her daughter-in-law, concubine Yu certainly cannot let Pan Yulu bear the charge of being unclean. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that the matter was finally settled. Concubine Han Xian, who had been silent all this time, quickly took the opportunity to suggest that the second prince and concubine should be responsible for the decoration of the palace. Empress Zhen 11 did not refuse, but nodded while looking at concubine Jiangshu. "The banquet halls in the palace are not small. I am afraid that it will be difficult for one person to handle it, So let the 8th prince and the 2nd prince concubine go together. Don't think that concubine Han Xian was hiding deeply. Empress Zhen 11 didn't know who concubine Han Xian was looking for. Decorating the main hall seems to be a bit busy, but fortunately there is no risk. For such a good job, Queen Zhen 11 will naturally sell it to concubine Jiangshu as a favor. Concubine Jiangshu naturally knew the empress's kindness, and she quickly took the 8th prince's concubine to thank her. In this way, the matters that each person is responsible for are determined. Early the next morning, the princes and concubines entered the palace under the still dark night. As soon as the 8th prince's concubine and the 2nd prince's concubine met, they went down to the main hall under the guidance of the palace staff. Pan Yula was left alone, shivering with cold in the night and cold wind. But in the blink of an eye, Pan Yula waited from dusk to dawn, and did not see Fan Kinjao. Seeing this, Pan Yula naturally wanted to go to concubine Yu to complain. Concubine Yu didn't expect Fan Kinjao to be so bold and dare to let go of the things she had decided. She immediately took Pan Yula to Fenji Palace with her. As a result, as soon as the angry mother-in-law and daughter-in-law entered the door, they saw the queen who was ill in bed and Fan Kinjao who was taking care of her. Empress Zhen 11 was not surprised by the arrival of the two of them, and said feebly, "Yesterday, I suddenly felt a headache, so I called the crown princess into the palace to stay overnight. She thought she would be cured today, but she didn't expect it to get worse. Well, now that Gun is not in the palace, I can only let the crown princess guard her every step of the way." The empress fell ill, and as the crown princess, Fan Kinjao was understandable. Not to mention the fact that everyone knows that Fan Kinjao knows medicine. Concubine Yu. She was negligent and forgot that the queen still had this hand. Pan Yulu. What should she do? What else can she do? Seeing concubine Yu and Pan Yulu walking away angrily, Queen Zhen 11 looked at Fan Kinjao and said, "Last night you entered the palace after a lot of hard work. You must be tired after all. I have asked Lily to the side hall has been tidied up. You have been resting there for the past few days. Go and have a good sleep and have dinner with me when you wake up." Fan Kinjao. Empress, is this considered opportunistic? Empress Zhen 11 looked indifferent, so what if she was just being opportunistic? Yesterday, the third princess took the initiative to propose that her daughter-in-law be in charge of the meals. She had no good intentions at all. Since concubine Yu was so unkind, how could she be expected to be righteous? Go to sleep, I always want to keep you fat and white so that you can keep up with Feng Ming. Fan Kinjao was also helpless. Faced with the queen's cunningness, she seemed to have nothing else to do except sleep. The 8th and 2nd princesses, who were responsible for the layout of the palace, led the palace people in and out every day. After only a few days, their voices became hoarse. Looking at Pan Yulu, she is not much better either. Originally, she and Fan Kinjao were responsible for the food, but now this burden falls entirely on her alone. Pan Yulu now wants to open her eyes to the heavenly spirit cap all day long, fearing that there is something wrong in it. Fan Kinjao was very comfortable. He went into the palace early every day to catch up on his sleep in the side hall of Fenji Palace. Then he had lunch with the queen, and in the afternoon he would chat with the queen. Talking and enjoying the scenery, the day passed. Empress Zhen 11 really took Fan Kinjao into her hands and doted on her without any selfish motives. Fan Kinjao was in a daze most of the time when he looked at the empress who took such great care of her. In her previous life, it was not like she had never been the daughter-in-law of a royal family, but only she knew what it felt like. At that time, Queen Zhen 11 had already died of illness due to Bailey Fengming and soon followed her. It is precisely because the positions of queen and prince in the harem are both vacant, concubine Yu and Bailey Rongs will continue to squeeze her crazily to no end. When the last bit of value is squeezed out of her, Bailey Rongs will also. After becoming the new emperor, concubine Yu naturally became the empress dowager. Nowadays, everything that has ever happened is undergoing earth-shaking changes. Empress Zhengzi is still here, and so is Bailey Fengming. It is precisely because of their existence that Fan Qinjiao is no longer alone on this road of revenge. After having dinner with the queen in the evening, Fan Qinjiao got on the carriage leaving the palace. He didn't want to wait for the carriage to stop outside the door of the western suburbs mansion. As soon as Fan Qinjiao got off the carriage, he heard someone calling from behind him. Looking at her, Crown Princess. Fan Qinjiao turned around following the sound and saw Jiyos getting off the carriage on the opposite side. After not seeing him for a long time, Jiyos' aura became calmer and more scheming. In this way, he completely coincides with the person in Fan Qinjiao's memory. Jiyos was actually quite afraid of Fan Qinjiao's eyes. He didn't know why, but when he was stared at by those eyes, he felt uncomfortable in his heart. When he realized that all the hairs on his body were standing on end, Jiyos quickly broke the silence. I heard that the crown princess has been entering the palace to attend to the empress's health recently. I shouldn't have bothered the crown princess, but last time Ji when leaving Yuzhu, Tianyu repeatedly asked Ji to ask the crown princess for an object when she went there again, and Tianyu said that this way she could always take it out and take a look at it even when she misses the crown princess. Fan Qinjiao laughed when he heard this, and quickly asked the concierge to go to his yard to send a message, ask Ningguan to open the warehouse in my yard and get the sandalwood box from the shelf on the west side. The concierge nodded and hurriedly ran in to deliver the message. Jiyu saw that Fan Qinjiao was not surprised at all, but was surprised and said, "Did the crown princess have expected this?" Fan Qinjiao smiled and shook his head, "I can't say I expected it. I just prepared a dowry for her a long time ago. I thought I would give it to her after she came back. Since she was homesick, I took a dowry first, give her little things to play with." Jiyos was a little stunned when he heard this. As far as he knew, the crown princess had never stopped since she returned to the Hua family. But even though she was so busy, the crown princess still silently prepared a dowry for Tianyu, or in other words, she was afraid that all the younger daughters of the Hua family would have a share. When Ningguan brought the sandalwood box, Jiyos was stunned. "I saw a red coral bracelet quietly placed in a box with a touch of sandalwood. The color is pleasant and the texture is shiny. Even a layman like him can see that this thing is of great value. This bracelet is too expensive, and the emperor only asked for a small item." Fan Qinjiao smiled nonchalantly, "Compared with other dowries, it is really just a small item." Jiyos. "Is this how much money you make as a doctor now?" A gust of cold wind suddenly blew through, and a biting chill spread across the face. Fan Qinjiao was about to let Jiyos go up the steps to talk, but he saw a woman running down from the carriage across the street. End of this chapter.